Started.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Super excited to have you here with us today for our first flying solo conversation. It's a I think important conversation to have, one that doesn't happen often enough. And I always say that no one actually flies solo when they're living with a movement disorder because everybody has someone, and if we don't, we need to figure out how to. And flying solo doesn't necessarily mean you're single. It can mean that you've got family who's not available, who's not involved. It can mean that you live with somebody who's maybe not capable of being able to do a whole lot and help. There's a lot of different ways that this can play out for people, but it's something that we just really need to talk about because it is, when we say it's a team sport, living with a movement disorder, we really do mean that. It takes a team. So I'm really, really excited about this conversation. And I think maybe Anissa, you can I know people have heard from you before, but maybe they've probably never really heard your background. So maybe you could share a little bit of your background and who you are and what you bring to this kind of a conversation, and then maybe introduce Amy.
Okay, I would love to. Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. So some of you might have seen me on before, actually facilitating some of our programs. Anissa, and I am with PMD Alliance as their Vice President of Programs. But I've been with PMD Alliance since April. So before that is what Sarah is talking about, is what was my history before, and why am I having this discussion with you today with Amy. So I, for 10 years, served as the head of a Parkinson outreach program here in Orlando, where I live. And that outreach program involved a variety of different services for persons with Parkinson's and their care partners and family members, including, information and referral to resources in our community, counseling services, running support programs and educational classes. So I had 10 years worth of experience with our community members living with this disease, those that were living alone, or those that, like Sarah was explaining, may not actually been technically alone in the house, but for a variety of reasons didn't have the support of what we would consider a care partner, either because they might be caring for somebody themselves that had a health condition, which I came across quite a bit, or their family members just weren't available for lots of different reasons. And so I've had experience of dealing and helping people work through some of those issues, or just recognizing where they might need help. My background is in social work. I'm a clinical social worker. And I actually personally experienced Parkinson's in my own life with my mom. So she didn't live in this state. So I served kind of as a distance, an adult child. So I've been in the role kind of both as a professional and personally as a care partner to my mom as an adult child. I came to know Amy, and we actually were just talking about this as, how is it that we've known each other for so long, but we don't either one of us remember how we met each other. But Amy and I worked collaboratively here in Orlando. As she was a resource that I utilized to help people when they needed someone to kind of come in and step in to assist them, either because they didn't have support and or they were in the midst of a crisis. So that kind of segues me into introducing Amy O'Rourke, who is an aging life care specialist. And Amy, I would love it if you would kind of share a little bit of your background, and then we can then go on and talk about how we've partnered together and even dealing with some of these things.
Oh, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to see everybody's faces. Sometimes when you do these Zoom calls, you don't get to see everybody. So I'm glad that you have your cameras on, and that I do look for nonverbal cues. So if we're saying something and you look confused or you want to raise your fingers and ask a question, I'd love for this to be as interactive as possible, given that we're on the camera. So, and I think Anissa is a little, she understates her value in Orlando. There's not really anybody that is dealing with Parkinson's that doesn't not know Anissa. Everybody in town knows Anissa, and her programs were the most widely attended support group and educational groups in the area. Everybody was going there, huge. So when she first asked me to work collaboratively in a support group of hers, I thought, God, I'm honored. I'm honored that she would think that I would be good enough to talk to her group, because she had such a fantastic program going on. But I'm an aging expert, otherwise known as a care manager. I'm a licensed nursing home administrator by background. I started a company to help older adults and their kids with navigating the big messes that are out there. The hospital, the nursing home, assisted living, home care, Medicare, all the, you got all the healthcare systems, and you have all the financial systems, and the adult children are trying to help their parents, or parents are trying to help each other. And all the systems are very confusing. So I wanted to be out in the community. I'm not a social worker, but sometimes I pretend to be one. I also try to pretend to be a nurse when I can get away with it, but I'm not a nurse. I'm a licensed nursing home administrator. And I think of this as an avocation and a vocation to help others with information to get as much as you can get out of the life that you're living right now. So I'm pleased to be here. And Anissa, how do you want to start this? We're used to just batting things back and forth. So do you want to lob some thoughts my way, or me your way?
Yes. And you guys can lob back and forth, and I'm going to lob some ideas to you too, for you guys to kind of volley back and forth with. We are so tickled to have both of you. I think this will be such a great conversation. As Becky mentioned, you can put questions here in the chat if you want. You also will be able to unmute yourself and ask questions. Somebody asked if this will be recorded and be able to watch later. It will be. So let's get going. I covered a little bit about who might fit in this category. And I'm curious if you guys maybe can help expand our thinking about what this means.
Sure. So, and Amy, pipe in at any time. So I feel like the obvious is those who are single because they never married, single because they're widowed or divorced or even separated. We have people that maybe have family members in the area, but they don't live with them. We have people, like I think I mentioned earlier, that they may have a spouse or a partner that lives with them, but they're not capable of serving as a support person to them because of either their own medical condition. And I've even run into the situation where the person with Parkinson's was the care partner for the other person that might have had another disorder. Although I've, interestingly enough, ran into a few times couples that both had Parkinson's. And I can think of at one point when I had this couple, and they actually were both widowed and met each other at a support group, fell in love and got married. And the wife of the couple ended up serving kind of as a care partner to her husband, who was a little more advanced in the disease when they got married, and he ended up passing away from other conditions later, and then never really saw herself as the person with, even though she did have it. So we really had to kind of work through some of the things that we're going to be discussing today with her, because her mind was still in that mindset of being the care partner, as opposed to also being the person diagnosed and having her own struggles. So I think that is another situation. Amy, any others that you can input on?
Yeah. So I want each of you to think about your own scenario. And when I saw the title Flying Solo, really the first person I thought about is the gentleman that I had as a client, whose family, he had 6 children, and they all wanted him to do something that he didn't want to do. And I considered him to be flying solo because he was really on his own, because none of the kids were going to be supporting him in what he wanted. So what I would challenge you to be thinking about is, do you have someone, you're flying solo unless you have someone that's in sync with you. Okay, whatever that is, if it's a friend, if it's a spouse, if it's a child, if you don't have somebody that is in sync with you or willing to be in sync with you, then you are flying solo. So, I would applaud everybody for being on this call, to be thinking about this now. And if we create discomfort in this call, I will consider our job to have been done, because out of discomfort, you can maybe take some action steps that'll help you. One of the reasons people end up flying solo inadvertently is they're too prideful to ask for help. I will tell you that over and over, pride is the biggest barrier to a successful lifestyle with a chronic condition. You're hanging on for dear life. You won't let any help in. You don't think it's time. And I will tell you from my own history, when I need help the most is that I'm least apt to ask for it. And my husband will elbow me really big and say, you know, you want some help with this, or don't you think you should call somebody and ask for help? So think about your world and ask yourself the question, am I flying solo? And then start listening to us with that in mind.
You are
That
muted.
is so powerful. Sorry. That is so powerful and so true. And I think you're right. Oftentimes, if you lose track of a friend, sometimes that's because maybe they're having a hard time. And it's a great point. People don't, when they need it the most, a lot of times we don't reach out. So thank you for helping us expand how we look at this flying solo. And you can be in a group. You can have a lot of family members, to your point, 6 kids, and still be flying solo. So I really appreciate that kind of a conversation. And, you know, when you think about, you know, maybe we can start with some obvious things people think about when they're living alone or flying solo, especially during COVID and the holidays. What are some things, you know, people who are flying solo should consider?
Well, the obvious is isolation, something that we're all feeling to some degree, whether you're a person with Parkinson's or not. We're collectively experiencing some form of isolation from our family and our friends. So that's one, but that is an issue for the people in the Parkinson community anyway, for lots of different reasons. So when you're in a situation where you may be in a house by yourself, or your loved ones that's in the home with you may not be able to serve as that kind of elbow, you know, to do the things that you need to do, that isolation is a huge problem. And we know that not even just the socialization and the impact that that has on us just in how we feel mentally, but cognitively, the impacts that social isolation can have is great. And we've had speakers that's talked on that as experts, you know, talked about sensory deprivation and the impact on cognition. And some of us, you know, that live alone, you know, that's hard to navigate outside of COVID. So COVID's added an additional layer that we have to try to figure out, how do we manage. Thankfully, we have tools like Zoom, but we have to be intentional about it. So what I have found, and you've mentioned this before, like, you know, if you're feeling apathetic, if you have a lack of motivation, if you're struggling with depression, you know, you may not reach out. So if you're not reaching out and people don't think to reach out to you, that becomes a vicious cycle that you can spiral down. Because, and we've noticed it, just, we call it home habituation. Like my husband just told me the other day, do you realize you haven't left the house since Saturday? We have this app on our phone that tells him when I leave, for our family. And he's like, you haven't left the house since Saturday. And I'm like, oh, wow, like we get stuck in our routine. And sometimes that is a very negative thing in lots of ways because it feeds it. So the more I don't do, the more I tend to not want to do. And then if I don't have somebody saying, Anissa, you need to get out, you need to socialize, it might just be unnatural for me to even do it. I don't even think about it. It's not triggered in me. So that is a problem that we all have to do, but especially we need to have, and I had luckily somebody noticing that and pointing that out to me. You need to go outside. It's been, not that I haven't stepped outside the house, but I didn't leave my house in my car and go somewhere. So that had to be intentional. I don't, they may not have that built-in support to check on them. How are you doing? If someone's dealing with depression or anxiety, and we know that that can tend to cause isolation additionally, just outside of our situation of being at home, who's checking on them? How are they doing? What if you're dealing with somebody that struggling with hallucinations, and they're starting to have like some minor hallucinations or even impulse control disorders? These are real things that people deal with, that if you have someone that's right there checking on you and asking you about these things, and they will suggest, okay, well, we need to talk to the doctor about that. Who's doing that? So those are some, I think, just off the top of my head, big ones that from a social and emotional well-being standpoint needs to be brought up. And Amy, I know that you can add to this conversation what we can do to help people to be more mindful of it, to be more intentional. And that's great to be mindful and intentional of it, but what are some practical things that we can share with our group members here today on what they can do if they don't have that built-in person?
Well, there's a couple of things I think about when I hear the word isolation. Often I'll think about the prisoner of war camps. They put people in isolation to torture them. So that's like the extreme. So if you think about it, you're at home and you're in isolation, and you're going to become, kind of wacky because you're not being exposed. Don't you like that professional word, wacky? I'll put that in my. So how I want you to think about this is in the research on isolation and increased confusion is so well researched. So Parkinson's has a dementia coinciding diagnosis along with it. So if you're isolating or you're not getting out of the house, you're going to think of it like a vitamin is getting out of the house and taking a walk. Energy begets energy. Period. You put out energy to get energy. And so one of the things that I do for myself that I think works, across the board, regardless of your diagnosis, is if I've been at home alone and in my pajamas or something, I don't feel that great about myself. So do you get up? Do you get dressed? Do you get ready for the day? And then two, if you haven't spoken to another person, where can I speak to another person? If all I've been doing is sitting home thinking about myself, then I need to balance that out with thinking about somebody else, like getting out of myself. That is probably one of the best little hidden secrets, is getting out of yourself to balance out the negative energy that comes from isolation and being in your head for long periods of time. So are there organizations that would appreciate you calling people that are shut in that you can check in with? Are there groups that you can help? And I'm talking, once we get out of COVID, it's going to be a little bit easier, but your neighborhood, there's somebody out there walking their dogs that you can go out and make sure that you're out there at 7:30 in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning and wave to them and say nice things to them, or bring somebody's newspaper from the bottom of the driveway up to the top of the driveway, or the garbage collectors that are coming by, are you standing out there thanking them for their service? So what is going on in the world around you, and what can you contribute to that world to take a break from being in isolation, I think. And what I would say to you is, if you're early on in the diagnosis, if it's recently diagnosed or within your first few years, I like to think about this like a muscle memory. You know, put in your movement and getting out of isolation as a daily habit that you get into. Nobody likes to exercise, do they? I mean, 90% of the world doesn't like to exercise. Everybody signs up for exercise programs in January, and by March they've dropped out, right? I mean, so people don't, and then I've heard clients say, I like my pets more than I like people. Well, I like my pets too, but pets can't talk back. And when you're engaging with somebody and you're talking to them back and forth, you're firing off neurons and you're getting your head, you're circulating blood circulating that is very, very valuable. And you're getting those endorphins lifted that will help you sustain yourself through a rough patch. So isolation in my mind is a contributor to increased dementia and depression. So if you're already given the diagnosis of Parkinson's or a movement disorder, then you want to add a layer to prevent isolation to help give you a good quality of life through the rest of the years with your diagnosis.
So there was a comment, and I want to address it because this is exactly the reason that we're having this conversation today, is what if somebody doesn't have anybody to turn to? There's just no family, there's maybe no friends. And I've known people that have moved and didn't know someone, and especially now that we're not getting out and interacting with other people and making friends at groups or whatever, that adds a layer additionally to that inability to connect with people. So let's talk about that, like what someone would do if they don't have anyone. And I like what you just mentioned, Amy, because you already built in, probably maybe they didn't catch it, but if you live alone and you want people to know you and you want people to acknowledge you, and to know, like, if you don't show up to wave to the garbage man, or you haven't been seen by the mailman, well, then that's a trigger that maybe something's wrong. So even if you don't have someone that's checking on you, making yourself known to the people that regularly visit you in your neighborhood, your neighbor, your mailman, your garbage collector, the yard people are accustomed to, maybe, or you can get them accustomed to them seeing you, so that if all of a sudden you don't see them, well, that's at least one place where it might trigger, I haven't noticed that, Mrs. Mitchell's been out or whatever. I wonder what's going on. So let's talk also, Amy, like, what other additional things, if someone lives alone and they don't have anyone to turn to, especially now that we're pretty isolated, what are some things that people can do to connect and get connected with people and build those relationships and or accountability buddies?
Well, I was just reminded of a client I had years ago. She was an agoraphobic and she was confused, and she lived in her house. And when I went over to see her, she would be looking out her window, and out of her window, she knew everybody that walked by. She knew their names, she knew their kids, she knew who they were married to, she knew their pets, she knew everything about them. It was like sitting in a soap opera in her house. She knew everybody. They didn't know her, but she knew everything about them. Now, to some degree, that kept her occupied and interested. It's not the same as reaching out and knowing them, but that to me was like this hidden gem that she had that she never chose to access. Now, there are introverts in the world and there are extroverts in the world. So I'm going to express to you what I would do. But, there are people that are generally not they really uncomfortable and not in their skill set to get out and say hello to somebody. And I do think that it is harder for some people that are born that way, and that it doesn't, not good or bad. It's just, I think, harder. I had a business partner that was very much the introvert, and she was so uncomfortable reaching out to people. So what she used to do is just do one-on-ones all the time. She would never go into a group. And so if your comfort level is one-on-one, then I would reach out to any of the religious organizations. And I say religious, churches or temples or mosques or the religious organizations, and see if this is comfortable for you, if you can be a member or a participant in any of the programs that they have going on, either by Zoom or by phone. or live streaming. Just tap into an already existing club or organization and take the courage to say, I'm new to the area. I've never been to this group before. I'd like to say my name out loud. I don't get out a lot. And it will produce some anxiety, but I think that is a first step towards getting out of isolation, is to raise your hand and say hello. I've got a neighbor that they have this little dog that's blind and has 3 legs, and I know the dog's name. I can't remember the couple's name, but I'm telling you that if I'm not out walking my dog, she would know that something was wrong, because we pretty much have the same routine with our dogs. So insert yourself into some already existing happenings in your community or in a club or organization that resonates with you. You might be more culturally interested. And there are, I mean, if you're savvy with the internet, if you aren't, you should get to be. Start Googling. All of the arts organizations have stuff going on outline: music, the opera, dance. Plug yourself in and put yourself in the chat box and say hello, type your name. The problem with, do you have anybody that can be with you for the duration of your condition? That is a national phenomenon. There are a lot of people out there that don't have somebody, and this is where the real work begins. There aren't, paid people that will be your person for the rest of your life. So you need to find somebody. I mean, you could pay to have that kind of support, but it's not affordable for a lot of people. But you want somebody at the doctor's office, somebody at I had one gentleman that was kind of adopted by the lab, that he used to go every month because he had lab draws that had to be gone every month. So he befriended that gentleman, and he became one of his really good friends. So be creative in the world that you're in to see where you can tap into somebody that could be a part of your life. And I would also say, take interest in them before you expect them to take interest in you. That usually gets the energy going in a relationship faster than waiting for someone to ask about you. To be brave and ask about them first.
So I've been watching the comments, and I think this is a perfect time to segue into some of the practical issues that, let's be honest, people living alone or with limited support systems need to figure out. So with Parkinson's being a progressive disease, as time goes on, whether it's physical, cognitive, or what have you, the ability to do things like home maintenance and housework and shopping and finances and all of those things can become challenging. And, there's a variety of issues here, and it's the issue of opportunity, having somebody that's able to assist with that. It's also the issue of willingness. Someone mentioned, I haven't been vulnerable all these years. Why would I start now? Well, because it's imperative at this point that you make a choice for yourself before someone forces a choice on you out of crisis. So it's important to consider what your options are. And so isolation and dealing with the emotional aspect is one piece of it. Physically, that's a whole nother piece, and they work together because if you're depressed, if you're anxious, if you're unmotivated and you're isolated and you don't have anyone, it's going to be harder when you get to addressing this next layer of issue, which is, what are you going to do when you start freezing and you're not able to break your own freeze? What are you going to do if you wake up one morning and you can't get out of bed? Or what if you accidentally knock all of your medications down and you can't get down and pick them all up, and then you mix them up and then you mess up your medications? Who's watching to make sure that you didn't mix up the medications in a detrimental way? Or you started a new medication and you have an adverse reaction to it. Who's watching that? So it's very important to be aware of these issues and then work on what's practical in your terms. Not everybody can afford to hire care people to come into the home. And like Amy mentioned, you know, you can only go so far with outside assistance unless it's a family member willing to come in and help you. You know, you're going to have to think now. So this is a conversation that isn't going to solve all of your specific issues, but it's a conversation to get you thinking about, okay, so I know that I'm dealing with this situation. This is my support system or lack of support system. So here's what I need to consider. I need to consider, is where I'm living a safe environment for me to remain in? Is there anyone, or do I have the finances, I should say, to, if I don't have someone that's willing to help me and I'm willing to allow them to help me, because I think Amy mentioned pride as an issue that can go before the fall, literally. You know, and you know, if you don't have the finances to hire somebody, what are your options? So that's where somebody like Amy's expertise can come in. But you really need to think about, you know, who's going to take out the garbage when you can't? Who's going to pick up the mail when you can? What happens if you have an emergency in the middle of the night? Do you have the ability to call for help? Do you have systems in place? Have you even thought about those things? So these are the things that we need to discuss. So Amy, I'm going to I know that you have gone in and you've helped in the midst of crisis. And I don't know, Sarah, too, if you're pulling out, because I'm not watching a chat.
No, it's good. I'm pulling out a couple things. Let me, if I can pipe in really quickly, because I know you're going to ask Amy a question. This is such a good conversation. And boy, if there's one thing that is so clear and not surprising, makes my heart hurt. And it is also not surprising that this is a conversation that is way long overdue in the Parkinson's and movement disorder community. You know, somebody brought up a good point. Everything is like the care partner. And a lot of people, yes, have care partners. And a lot of people don't, or did, and their care partner's not here anymore. I mean, so there's such a complex thing. What I want to make sure that you all know is we're tracking this. For those of you that are new to PMD Alliance, I'm going to just quickly insert just a little bit about who we are and how we work. We do these kind of programs because we watch and we hear and people share comments and we really pay attention to themes we're hearing. We really try hard not to duplicate what's out there because that's a waste of resource and energy. And that's not always easy to do, but we really try to see where there are gaps and where there are pain points that are not being addressed. So, and then we watch that and we just try it. And one of our beliefs in this organization is, if we wait till we have it all figured out to roll it out, you will never see a program because we will never have it all figured out. So you also, for better or worse, get to see the messy parts because it's how we learn. And so I'm valuing every single one of these comments because what they help us do is think about what's next. What's the next program we need to do for this? What's the next iteration we need to do for this? But the other piece you should know is, as I'm watching some of your names, I'm writing them down because I might have to follow back up with you because your insights are valuable. And what you don't need is like me deciding what you need. We need to hear from you. So just rest assured when you're hearing this, and I know you haven't been attended to in programs, rest assured that we are watching this, and this is not your only chance to be attended to. We will learn from this and grow with this, and we want to learn and grow with you. And that is our job. So just trust that we're watching all of these, and this is such a good, robust discussion. So I'm going to put it back with you, Anissa, but I just wanted people to feel comfortable with that.
And I appreciate you said that. I just want to address one of the comments on here. Well, actually a couple of them. One in regards to trust. Well, that is something that we put ourselves out there for anytime we hire somebody in, whether it's the contractor that's working on our house, the plumber, the electrician, or whatever. You vet your people. And if they mess up, then you fire them and you move on to the next. And that's very laborious and frustrating. But in anything, if you're hiring somebody to come in, remember they work for you. And so you direct that. And I'm sure Amy has another comment about that. But I also want to talk about considering your interior environment so that you can age in place. Well, there are options for that. An occupational therapist would be a really good start to have them come in and do an evaluation of your home safety. Not only can they evaluate like some safety risks in your bedroom and in your bathroom and the key areas that we potentially would have falls, but there's also tools that they can offer. And instead of going out and just purchasing, adaptive devices because they look pretty and they look like they'd be cool, and I saw this on an infomercial and it looks like it would be helpful, instead of wasting your time and your money on that, ask the OT to give you an evaluation of what works best for you, for your environment, instead of spending the money. Because actually, instead of using a tool, there might actually just be a different technique as opposed to purchasing something. Because the more that you do for yourself, the more you're going to be able to continue to do for yourself. So there may just be a different way of doing something, or they may have other compensatory strategies to help you. So that's a resource and a tool that you can use to kind of evaluate. And if there's things that, your home environment's just not safe, you have way too many stairs. I mean, there's people that I know that I really recommended that they consider a move because their home was just a very, I hate to say it, but it was an unsafe environment, hard floors and lots of stairs, and they were already falling, that, they should consider moving into a different environment. If that's not an option or is not something you want to do, then having somebody come in and evaluate what can you do to make it safer. And yes, having somebody come in during COVID is a challenge, just like right now for any situation. So that is something you just have to talk over what their precautions are. Amy, I know that you have a lot to comment in regards to some of that. So did you want to weigh in?
Well, I do. What I was thinking about was, we'll throw out isolation and then, black and white, certainty versus being uncertain. So when you have a diagnosis of Parkinson's movement disorder or a chronic condition, the biggest habit that I've seen people get into is they want certainty. I want this way is the right way and that way is the wrong way. And to the degree that you can get comfortable in what I would call the gray area, and to give you an example, it would be, I really like being in my home and I really don't want to leave my home, but I'm alone here and I need support. Do I need to move to a community? And I'm not saying somebody should or shouldn't. This is just as an example to show you the world of gray area versus black or white, certainty versus lack of certainty. Is that maybe the decision to move to where there are more people around, you will get more security, but there's a trade-off. There's compromise. There, you will lose some things like your privacy or being in comforts of your own home, but you'll gain the support of others. And if you live within a community, and when I say that, I mean at home, but you're an active part of a community, or you're actually living in a community, the longevity and the quality of the longevity is shown to be more robust and longer and healthier with support. So if you are prone to want certainty before you take an action, the work then would become getting comfortable with some gray areas. So if I went to one of the comments where someone was saying, where do I go for somebody to pay my bills? Okay. So not to, promote one thing or the other, but I've seen clients have, one of their church fellowship members help them with their bills. I know CPAs have bill paying services. I know there's an association of daily money managers and they do bill paying for people. There's the Aging Life Care Association, and care managers can help with that. So, and then it's all on how much do you want to pay to have somebody handle your bills. And so the gray area is, all right, I'm going to give up a little bit of control and have somebody take this on. But the trade-off is I'm going to have more mental space in my head to do the things that I need to do to take care of myself. And I like to think of the work is managing your energy level with this diagnosis. And I'll put my own values in this comment. I would want my energy to be expended in things that I enjoy. At this stage of life, I'm going to want to do things that I enjoy. The things that I don't enjoy, I'm going to find an affordable way to have those things done. I'm not going to want to mow my lawn. I'm not going to want to take my garbage out. I'm not going to want to cook. I'm going to tell you right now, things that I'm going to hire out, if at all affordable, and then conserve my own energy for the things that I'm going to enjoy, which for me would be going to yoga, going out for a walk, and having lunch with good girlfriends. That's me. So, there's trade-offs with every decision you make. And so to get clear with what your own values are, and if you're saying, like some of my clients do, I'm going to stay home at all costs. I don't care what happens. They're going to take me out in a pine box, or the people that really don't want anybody in their lives. Anissa and I have seen them. They end up in the hospital with a tragic event because they were unsupported. And then their life gets driven by the crisis that they're in, and it's no longer intentional. It's reactive. And those are sad scenarios to have to support you with.
And
for,
go ahead. No, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you just bring up such a good point, because it is the intentional decision making that you're really talking about, versus not having it be kind of what happens to you. And one thing that somebody put in the chat, I just want to bring up that I thought was a really good point about that intentional piece, is the set up bill pay right now. So, because one of the things that I think about is, and we know with cognition changes with Parkinson's disease, with many of these movement disorders, executive function changes, and it happens so slowly, we don't always know what's happening. And so, getting ahead of that, the cognition piece, I think, can be tricky for people who are truly living alone and trying to navigate that. Are there tips about how you might be able to know that is happening, or keep on top of that for yourself for safety reasons and management?
Oh yeah, let me take this one before Anissa gets it. You will not be the first to know. I'm sorry, you will not be the first to know. When their cognitive disorder steps in, usually you don't know what you don't know. You don't remember what you don't remember. It's true. Mm-hmm. So I would get an ally, and I would communicate with that ally, and I would handwrite what you're thinking and say, you set your own boundaries, and you say in handwriting, if I miss, X number of bills, if I wander off, you name the things that you want them to tell you. And then you sign it to say, it's at this point that I want you to step in and get me some help. Because most of the time, and Anissa, you're unaware. Mm-hmm. You're unaware. It's like someone with a hearing loss, they're saying, speak a little louder, you're not talking loud enough. And you but they can't hear. So they're unaware that you're yelling. And so it's the same concept with a memory impairment, that you're unaware. Very rarely will you know. So get an ally, put it in writing, and name some of the scenarios that you're really clear. If you get to this point, whatever that point is, you want this action plan to be implemented, whatever that action plan is. You want your nephew to take over your finances. You want, care brought into the home so many hours a day. You want to, whatever your plans are with your own circumstances, write it down and let someone else agree that someone else is going to help you know that you really are at that stage.
And I would even, tag on to that is that you could, work with an elder law attorney to formalize a lot of this, and they can help you come up with some some suggestions or ideas. If you don't have someone that you feel like you can trust or you're comfortable with, then maybe that's something that is hired. And you know that they're being watched, because you're paying for that. So something to consider. And you don't have to tell people the reason that you want to set up things because your fear is that you're losing your cognition. It's just that I'm single and anything can happen. I have plans in place, so if something were to happen to my husband and I was in a situation that I couldn't speak for myself for whatever reason, even today, I want to know that I have somebody that's going to speak for me and knows what I would choose for myself. So that's set in place, and that takes a load off of your mind. And Amy is absolutely correct that you don't necessarily know the subtle changes. And if you live alone, you may not pick them up, whereas a care partner might. Do you know that you said that 3 times? Do you know that you've forgotten, or you've asked me about this, X amount of times? You may not realize that you're doing that, and how those trickle down into your everyday activities and your decision making. And so, not to take away from your independence, but to give you independence. People think a lot of times that having to ask for help, use assisted devices, hire, people to come in is giving up independence. But I like to reframe that a little bit into extending your independence, because you're, still in control, but you're just getting a little supplemental help to it. But you're the one making that decision, versus not doing so. A crisis occurs, and then someone has to step in and make that decision for you. And it may not be the decision that you wanted. I'll just share a story of, I'll just say it was a family member who had not Parkinson's, they had MS, but they were in a wheelchair, and really insisted, even though probably shouldn't have lived alone for as long as they did, insisted on living alone. And the very minimum that we could get this person to implement to assist them, in the risk of a fall, was to get an emergency response button. So either the pendant around the neck or on the wrist, so that if they fell, it would be, something they could call, get assistance. Only good if you use it. Okay. So she didn't like it. She had a real pride issue. She didn't want people to think she needed help, even though she was in a wheelchair 24/7. She could transfer, but not safely. She went out that day and she came back and forgot to put it on. She shoved it into her purse because she didn't want someone to see it when she was out. She didn't put it back on. She got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. She fell and she laid for days because she didn't want people to come in and snoop and check on her. So she didn't have a built-in system to have people checking on her, and she didn't have the button to call for help until people got suspicious. We got suspicious and had someone search for her. So that's an extreme, but it took away her independence, because then she had to go into the hospital, and then she had to go into a facility for quite some time. And she had pretty significant pressure sores and things that required a lot of healing time. And so her feeling like she was giving up her independence is what caused her to lose her independence. So sometimes admitting that you need the extra help and then finding ways to do it. And if you don't have the solutions to it, then ask other people. Look for a care manager like Amy has, and she can share, resource of where you can find them. Meet with an elder law attorney and talk to them about what your options are. Speak with the financial planner and see what your financial options are, and make your plans early so that you can be in control, and that maintains your independence. Because quite honestly, you don't really know when the changes occur, and they can happen rapidly, and one fall can be your downfall.
And A couple of people are commenting on like this is causing anxiety, like worrying, you know, that this scare, it's scaring, and feeling like maybe this feels like scare tactics. And
No.
I think this does go back to what we talked about, and what Amy kind of said is, I think it is surfacing some of the uncomfortable discussion. So I also think, you know, it is taking pieces of this, right? So it's just thinking about what piece do I want to take on, and this, you know, not every day all day, but maybe 1 hour a week. I'm going to take this one piece on. And I think we all see this as we age, and I can say that compared to where I was 20 years ago to now, like the things I actually don't want to talk about, it gets harder, right? Because the losses, that's just what happens with aging. Forget PD, just with aging alone, you know, the changes are tough, and we know that. And so this is definitely not to create fear, but it is to bring to surface things that we can plan, because where the hope in all of this is, and where the belief in all of this is that there there is hope out there, there are solutions out there, and you guys know them. You've been working with these, and you've been dealing with these, and this is where we need to create a forum, probably, to have an ability to share some of these ideas that you guys have. There's been some great ideas that have come through in the chat. What I will say is, after this, we will send out an email to everyone who's here, that has information, so that you know, if you've missed something, we'll make sure that it's in there. I'm going to really quickly mention that I've been having a little conversation with Michaela, who actually is running a program for people who are kind of flying solo with Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. We'll include that in the resources. They're pulling together resources for people. So trust us when I say this is not the only time, but I think that if we don't talk about these things, that doesn't help us either. It's a really,
Like the elephant in the room,
yeah.
and it's a painful one. We're absolutely right. What Sarah said is that we're not being insensitive to that, but it's just like that tough love. Like, we have to talk about it, because knowledge is your power for you to make the decision. And that's what we want. We want you to make the decisions of what happens to you, not someone else making that decision for you. And I've seen that happen, and I would love to see that not happen, because you thought about it early on and you weighed what your options are.
And somebody, you know, Pat, just going to bring this up because Pat, I think the way you said it is, you know, it's uncomfortable now. Once we're prepared, it brings us peace. I mean, it's the peace of what do we have control over, that wonderful serenity prayer. Because we don't have control over everything. I mean, in a perfect world, we would, you know, snap our fingers and have the person who's going to take care of this stuff. And I wish we could. And until we can figure that out, I think this is why we all show up in these kind of hard conversations together, and kind of walk through it together. Yeah.
I would say too, just to echo what's been said, you know, I've seen over and over the years people that have really gutted through the tough part of making some decisions and making some plans and having hard conversations with their children. They look so much better. They feel so much better. Their energy level is better, and it's, you know, not taking action weighs on you, and not taking action on several things weighs on you. And so I think I would echo Sarah and Anissa that what we're wanting for you is to take some actions so that you feel better. It's amazing to me over and over how many times I'll give a to-do list to a client and they'll start chipping away at that to-do list. And the next time I see them, there's more color in their face and their countenance is a little brighter. And You know, it's always amazing to me that, and it's not really like they did a lot, but they did some of the big things and it took the weight off of them. So I think that is really what we're wanting for you, is to create a little like discomfort, but then propel you to take care of a few things so that you can feel better.
I think Terry had her hand up. Did you have a question, Terry? Is it Heems? Did you want to ask a question?
And you can just press unmute if you want to ask a question. No. If you do, just pipe in and ask us.
Janet has her hand up. Janet Edelman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have a preference for the devices that, you know, the falling devices, the wrist or the neck ones? Do you have any suggestions on which are the better? There's a lot out there.
There is a lot out there. It depends on what you want. So first, you know, the name that comes to mind is the Philips Lifeline. You get a little box in your house and it goes 850.
I want something that he can leave the house with.
Something you can leave the house. Oh, there's so
Right.
much out there. Yeah, there's so much out there. I don't have a product name, but I will send some information to Sarah to get out to the group.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've had
That's
quite a few
fantastic.
questions about whether we can put together a list of resources. So we'll do kind of like the key ones, because there's a lot. And then some areas have different resources available than others, but we'll give like a general list of things.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And just so you know, we are able to kind of pull this chat. So we will be able to pull the information. There's lots of little questions like, I'd like to know where this is. I'd like some resources. We can follow up with you. And again, like I said, this will not be the only conversation. I would say that probably in this list, Anissa, don't you think we probably could have like, oh, I don't know, another 20 of these?
Probably.
You know, there's so much. So this is exactly how, by the way, we get a lot of our topics, because we watch these conversations, and this is exactly how. So we don't just throw out a topic that it might sound like everything else. We can get really specific with it. And I know we're really close to the top of the hour here. This has been I think it's been a robust discussion. I think sometimes uncomfortable. I think sometimes hopeful, sometimes frustrating, sometimes all of that, right? Isn't that the way it is? And in all of this, I will say, hopefully we've all learned something, because there is so much to learn from each other. And if nothing else, we learn from kind of a reflection of what somebody says and we think back about it. I'm super grateful that you are all here. Out of this discussion, we have surfaced 2 people who are going to connect with us. We do support group leader trainings. We help build new groups. We help bring new groups on. And if you know of anybody who is interested in starting a group, we're really trying to begin to start more groups. We have an ability to help you bring them online and provide you access to that so that it's not costing you anything. And I have 2 people who are ready to start a flying solo group. It would be an online group so that people can access it. So you 2 people know who you are, because I've been chatting with you privately, and I will circle back with you on that, so that we can get that going. I think that's super important. So you can have really the more personal discussions. When we do these kind of Zoom things and you've got 100 people on the line or something, it's not as personal. You will be able to have those if we build that. So you 2 people who know who you are, I will be contacting you. And we will link you up with Shannon, who will help you get going with a support group. And as you have more thoughts from this, send them to us. Don't you think, Anissa? Then we can really...
Yeah, I mean, we can do a part 2 and maybe drill down a little bit more on some of these specifics. Because I know in an hour, there's no way to cover everything. This was kind of just a general review of the topic and just kind of first thoughts to get you thinking and address the topic.
And thank you so much, Anissa and Amy, for bringing this up. Amy, there was a couple things in the chat of people requesting some tools that you referenced, so we'll circle back with you about that. You know, it really does take a village, it does take a team, and this here is our team. You know, when we might feel like we're flying solo, and we might be, but we do have each other. And this here, just having this conversation, staying engaged is at least half of the battle. So thank you all for being here. I like your thumbs up, Keith. Thank you all for being here. And thank you again, Anissa and Amy, for the conversation, and all of you that have added to the conversation in the chat. I think we should wave to each other, or we could give a virtual hug this time instead. We probably could all really use that hug.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
They were all hug deficient.
Right. Completely. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy, for joining me.
Beautiful. Good to see everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Time for a question?
Sure. Go ahead.
Do you think after we come out of COVID, PMD Alliance will continue these great Zoom audience participation programs? It's here to stay.
Yes. Yes. We will not go backwards. We only go forwards. So you will have both in person and online continue.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Wonderful to be with all of you. Okay, don't end the meeting, anybody, yet, because I'm writing down another address of somebody who will help with the support group. Okay.
Just hang out for a minute.
Yeah, and Lee, thank you so much. You are the original flying solo queen of support groups. So I'm so glad you are on, and we will definitely link with you with that, Lee. So glad you're here.
I just wanted to say I really appreciate you doing this. I was doing it for a couple of years, and then COVID hit, and I just realized it was too much to do it all on my own.
Yeah.
So I'm excited, and I'd like to be involved.
Oh, thank you, Lee. You're the inspiration for this. Lee is in San Diego, and we met, boy, now, when was that? Probably only last year, but it seems like 16 years ago, and since it's been so long.
And I'm excited you're using the name Flying Solo, because it gives us like an identity instead of just, oh, those people with Parkinson's who are on their own. So yay.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Lee. It was your brilliant idea, and we will loop you in for sure. We've got now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who are interested in helping pull this together. And I think with a group that size, it'll be a great steering committee, and you won't have to worry about traction. So I will be linking you up. Isn't this exciting? And this group can create a pretty cool checklist.
Yeah, that this just expands to something further. That's awesome.
Treasure each and every one of you. Hang in there. We will work through this together.
Thank you.
Fantastic
Thank you so
day,
much,
everyone.
everybody. Have a great, great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.